today. I wasn't quite sure what you had in mind, so I brought two of my important staff people with me. Kent Cottle is in the back there. He oversees all of our inspection and maintenance for our Salt Lake office. And Dennis Orgel, he's our safety guy, and also he interfaces with the insurance people, and anytime there's problems or claims, either one of these guys can help with anything we have. And I'll tell you that the previous speaker, boy, he's done a wonderful job segueing into some of what we see all the time. You know what I always say in our business, it's like selling ice to an Eskimo, being a sprinkler contractor, because we sell a product that, you know, first of all, the owner does not want in their building. They have that moving mentality. They think once the head goes off, they all go off. And, you know, while there are systems like that, it's not the common thing. It's usually a wet system. You know, second of all is, you know, we hope like hell you never have to use our system, quite honestly, because if you're using it, there's a problem within the facility. But third and most important is when it needs to be used, it better perform as it was designed to perform. And the best way for that to ensure that that happens is the proper inspection and maintenance on sprinkler systems. And I think the last speaker showed very well what happens when that doesn't occur. So with that being said, we'll segue into this. Now, beforehand, let me just say that anytime you have a question or a comment, raise your hand. You know, I want to have questions as we go, as opposed to wait till the very end, because often you get going, and by the time we get to the end, you forget what you was even going to ask. So, you know, you won't bother me at all by doing that. And second, from some of these presentations I've been to, you know, you walk away after the fact and you go, boy, I remember him talking about something, but I'm not quite sure what it was. So I tried to put on each of the slides either a, you know, website you can go to, or explain some of it in red right on the slide, some important things. So down the road, and I understand that you're going to get a PDF copy of this. So, you know, down the road you can look at it, maybe it'll jog your memory on things. So with that, we'll proceed a bit here. Now, you know, it's often said, you've got a sprinkler system. Why do we have that sprinkler system in? And it's really quite easy. I mean, there's national codes and state codes that dictate when sprinklers are going to be installed in buildings. As you see, both, this is the 2015 International Building Code and Fire Code. Unfortunately, the state right now is on the 2012 code, and we're in the process, and I sit on a code analysis council, and we're right now in the process of reviewing the changes between the 2015 and 2012. So there may be some changes coming up, but be aware that, you know, we're on the 2012 code. And the IBC is really for building inspectors. When a building's built, it's for new construction, because they tell you, you know, wall types and height limitations and everything. So that's for new construction for the most part. The fire code, and again, we're still on the 2012, that's what the fire departments like to see. That deals with not only new construction, it deals with existing buildings. So the fire department lives by that Bible there. You know, and so with that being said, the state of Utah, under this statute, has decided that they've reviewed both the 2012 IBC and IFC, and there are certain specific sections of each that they've taken exception to and maybe modified. You know, keep in mind these are national codes, and Utah's adopted what is best for them. Most of the counties go along with that. So that's the three main bodies that we deal with on when sprinkler systems are installed. Now, once they are installed, we have specific standards and that we have to deal with on the inspection and maintenance. One of them for the piping, in any water-based system, is NFPA 25. The state is on the 2011 edition, but if you ask the state fire marshal, he thinks it's a 2008. But it's actually the 2011 being enforced right now. Seems like a minor thing right now, but later on as we go through this presentation, you'll understand why it's important that we do that. NFPA 72 deals with the electrical detection part of systems. Pre-action systems, deluge systems, and so on actually have a separate detection part of that system, and that's what you have to look at there for the electrical part of those systems. Now, here is the NFPA 25. There's a link to it. Again, that's what we live and go by in the state here. And, so if anyone says that, they're doing a proper inspection for you, make sure that they're enforcing and going by this standard. Now, this standard assumes that the system, once it's installed, was installed correctly for the code it was under. So it's kind of a nebulous area there. We could be inspecting a system that was installed in the 80s, 90s, still inspect by the NFPA 25 for 2011, but you don't have to bring it up to any code standards because the assumption by 25 is it was accepted, at the time it was installed, so it was correct. A lot of inspectors sometimes will try and say, well, you're too far off a wall with this head or something like that. That's really not the intent of the inspection part. You have to assume, unless that wall was added later, that system was correct when it was installed. Okay, again, Utah has some, rules that they want to add above and beyond. And one of the rules I think is really good, and in fact is Kent myself actually was part of the State Fire Marshal's task force back in 2003 on this. We have set standards for people that are authorized to do inspections and testing on wet water-based fire systems. That's the rule there. You can go to the website and get that if you'd like. But the state also has further rules just beyond sprinkler systems. The 007 is fire suppression system, which is mainly, hood systems, Energen systems, FN200 systems, the old Halon systems. That's the requirements for doing any work on those systems. I'm sure some of you have those in your facilities, so they fall under different rules. That's why I'm kind of bringing this as an overview for you. Okay, the 009 is the rules pertinent to the Fire Prevention Safety Act. That's what actually gives the state fire marshal and the local fire marshals authority within the state of Utah. So that's where a fire marshal can come into a facility and demand it to have an inspection. That's right in their rule section. The 011, they've done the same thing similar to what they did with the water-based systems with fire alarms. So that's a totally different rule that you have to follow, but you have to have certified people in situations there. Okay, now who is really responsible? In NFPA 25, section 411, very clearly states the property owner or his designated representative shall be responsible for properly maintaining the water-based fire system. I don't know if you can really see this picture here too much, but that's a school that actually had turned off the heat over winter recess and found out that wasn't really a good idea with the wet system to turn off their heat. Been a lot of major damage, as you can see there. That being said, under 4.11, it's the building owner shall ensure all areas of the building containing water-filled piping shall be maintained at a minimum of 40 degrees Fahrenheit and not exposed to freezing. There is systems out there, dry systems for instance, that you can have below zero. They're not concerned with that. They're very concerned here. I hope I get this pointer working right here. Oop, went the wrong way, excuse me. Well, I guess I'm not getting the pointer to work, but they're concerned about the 40 degrees on water systems. And I'm sure some of you have heard about antifreeze being the solution. We'll talk about that a little further on. It's really not anymore. Okay, now this section out of NFPA 25 1.11 references us back to the 72 for the detection part of pre-action and deluge systems. One thing you want to make sure of, and there's companies out there, and we run into it all the time, that you go in and do an inspection and they'll say, well, it's already been done. We had an alarm company here last week. That alarm company only did the alarm portion of that possibly. They did not do the entire system. We ran into that numerous times where an owner thinks that he's covered, he's really not. So be aware of that there is some companies out there doing that. And, NFPA defines what's expected of the owners to provide a reasonable degree of fire protection for life and property from fire through minimum inspections, testing, and maintenance. That's a picture of a valve there, and I don't know if you can see all the corrosion inside of it there. But if I hit it again, sorry about that. That valve would likely not operate in the event of a fire. Just hadn't been maintained, bottom line. All right, and they go on to say the reasonable degree is achieved through proper and regularly scheduled visual inspections, testing and maintenance per table 5.1.12 of 25. The standard states that those inspections are visual from the floor, and they don't require removing ceiling tiles or going into the attic. Some inspectors actually in big, higher facilities will carry binoculars with them. That way they can look up and see sprinkler heads, see if there's corrosion on them, see if there's anything with hangers or something that would indicate a possible problem. Okay, this is that table, and as part of this, I've sent over, and I hope you'll be able to get copies of all these inspection forms. They're standard right out of NFPA 25, and they break this down pretty clear into 3 sections. This is what's required for inspections, here's the testing requirements, and here's the maintenance requirements of all the water-based systems. And you can see, for instance, here on gauges, they should be looked at on a pre-action and deluge system weekly or monthly. But those same gauges on a wet system only have to be looked at monthly. So, I would recommend that you follow these, and, they would help you immensely on these here. The valve components and trim shall be inspected, tested, and maintained per table 13.112. This table requires both an external and an internal inspection of the valves. I've seen some of our competitors tell customers that you don't have to do an internal inspection. And, very clearly all they're doing is what we call in the business is rag tagging. And they're not doing you as the customer any favors at all. They're charging you just to come in and sign the tag and put it on your riser. So be cautious of that. Here again, the same area is broken down. Here's what's required for inspections. Here's testing. Look at that pipe right there, which was pulled out of a local hospital here. I won't mention which hospital, but obviously if you think that system would work, I wouldn't feel safe being in that hospital myself. Here's the maintenance part of what's required right here. Tells you annually, quarterly, 3 years, 5 years. Again, that pipe right there come out of a local children's hospital. So if my child was in the hospital, I want to make sure. Yes, sir.
Is that rust that's in there, or is that other debris that's in
That's a combination of that. It could be rust. They have what they call mick that's out right now. It's a microbe that's actually attacking the internal walls of the piping, and you may get pinhole leaks. If you're starting to get pinhole leaks in systems, it's probably a mick issue. You know,
there?
so
That picture there shows the pipe, it looks good off the outside.
right.
That's what I'm saying, until you break it, you're not gonna see that.
Right, and there is requirements that, you know, every 5 years, we actually have to pull the end cap off a main and the sprinkler head out off the line and investigate to see if there is any debris. If there is, we have to do further investigation, possibly flushing the entire system. And, I mean, we've actually had to remove entire systems before because certain areas with certain water, it's really got bad. You know, over the years, and it's funny, I've been doing this now for 38 years. When I started, it was all Schedule 40 pipe, thicker wall, you know, heavy pipe. Nowadays, it's Schedule 10 piping, lighter piping. The MIG problem actually is worse on that than it is the heavier walled pipe. In addition, they've gone away from as much chlorine in water as they used to. So they're not killing that bacteria like they used to in the past, so it's still allowing it to survive. And, you know, the sprinkler system, a wet system, is totally stagnant once that system's filled up. So it's gonna, you know, occur in there quite often. And we've got systems out there 50 years old that are still in great shape, and some that have been installed in 5 years, we already had nick problems, so. Great question. All right. Here is the internal inspection, and this is what I was talking at just previously. We have to conduct it every 5 years by opening the end of a main flushing connection and pulling one sprinkler on that branch line. So, you know, yes?
That nick problem, can you treat that locally, or is that something?
There is some things now that you can put a solution within the piping that may, you know, prevent that. Some of the pipe manufacturers have got an internal coating, thinking that's going to help, but I think it's going to become a bigger issue as time goes on. Great question. Okay, like I mentioned before, NFPA 25 gives us the frequency of the inspections, and the R7105 tells us who can perform each inspection within the state of Utah. And the state allows the owner or designated representative to complete daily, weekly, monthly, or semi-annual inspections. So you don't need to be certified in that. But in order to do an annual 3 or 5 years, you must be certified. There's actually 4 different certifications within the state. A Tech Level 1 can do certifications on wet and antifreeze and standpipe systems only. Part of that certification is a written test that you have to take at the State Fire Marshal's office and have verification, you know, that you've done these in the past. When that was initially set up, it was set up as a closed book test. Some of the school districts and cities and counties wanted their own maintenance personnel to be able to do that. So, you know, being involved in the political arena, they changed it to an open book test. And so there is people within, you know, counties, cities that are certified in different levels. That's one additional reason why there's different technician levels here. If you go to a Tech Level 2, that guy has to pass everything as far as the Tech Level 1, plus take that written test on dry deluge pre-action, combined systems, fire pumps, and water tanks. And Level 3 is, he has to pass everything to Level 1 and 2, plus he has to do the written test on water spray systems, foam water systems. Those are specialized systems. You'll see them in power plants, you'll see them at refineries, aircraft hangars have foam systems. They definitely want people knowledgeable on those type of systems, because if you dump a foam, high expansion foam system by accident, You know, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars there, plus the potential for damage of any aircraft and so forth. So they want to make sure that, you know what you're doing. And then the master technician was kind of a compromise for people coming from out of state. They have a nice certification program, which is the National Institute for Certified Technicians. And they have a testing program for water-based systems. And the state felt if you had a level 3 in that regard, you could come into the state and get, by reciprocity, if you will, the master technician level here. So that's the reasoning behind that. Now, when you look at this here, this is a head right here. This is a concealed sprinkler head. The cover's been knocked off of. Going through and doing weekly inspections. Yes, sir.
I have one of those in my jail, and the reason that I have it off, it's like that. And we've got it back on, but it's in concrete. That head is buried in concrete there. And so in order to get to it, get that other cover put on it, they didn't quite bring the sprinkler down far enough to screw that on it, so it's difficult. Prisoners like to mess with that too.
They do. Yeah. The fact is, they have special heads for jails.
And they'll fill your room up really fast, full of water.
Yeah, they will. But they'll only set one off once, because once they do it, it's kind of obvious who it was that did it.
Yeah, well, the sheriff asked me, how do you stop that? And I said, you just take a towel and stuff under the door, let that room fill up, and then the problem will come away.
Yeah, I often say they ought to put them in small deluge systems, and whenever they have a riot, they just turn it on and it'll calm them all down. All right, now again, if you're doing the daily, weekly, or monthly, you can have either the certified technician come in and do that. And some companies initially, they want to do it all in-house. And I believe, like the previous speaker mentioned, he's now using independent third parties. And I argued with the fire marshal when they set that up, that to have the local guys do it, it's kind of like having the fox watch the hen house here. I mean, if you really truly want an independent inspection on it, that's what you should do. And here's the building owner or designated representative can do the daily, weekly, or monthly. I don't know if you can see this, but right there, that's a freestanding fire department connection. And I'm sure that fire department connection was installed when there was no trees there. And I know that the fire department wouldn't be able, first of all, they probably wouldn't find it in the event of a fire. Second of all, I don't think they take the time down, or to take the time to cut trees down to get to it. So, in essence, you're just tying the arm of the fire department at that point. So, anytime you see something like that, and I mean, this section's very clear that you have, that tree should be removed. So. Okay, on annual 3-year and 5-year inspections, they have to be done by a certified technician. And this was a rock we found in the dry pipe valve during the internal inspection of this. And I'm just amazed at how close that rock fits right in there. And could anybody tell me, could a tech level 1 do this internal inspection? The answer is no. It would have to be a tech level 2 because it's a dry system. So if you had a tech level 1 trying to say he's doing an inspection on a dry system, he's exceeding by state rule his authority on that. And here we have another example here, and I could not believe when I saw this picture, but that's a wooden stake that's right through the butterfly valve. They couldn't figure why they couldn't get the system to shut off, and I mean, pretty obvious why it wouldn't shut off. So, it underground was probably flush correct and everything when it was installed, but over time, every time something's open and closed, water's flowing, it's picking up whatever debris in there, and that just happened to get lodged in that valve. So, Here's an example of the inspection forms. Like I say, you should have these for your use here. But by the International Fire Code, you are required as a building owner to have all inspection and maintenance records available on site for a minimum of 3 years. The fire marshal comes in, one of the first things he's gonna ask you is, let me see your maintenance records. So, you know, what we do as a company, we kind of got away from putting them on, leaving them on the site. We supply the owner PDF copies of everything, let them put them there on site, because they have a tendency to walk away or something, but the owners ask us more often than not to give them the PDFs for their records. That way they can have a copy on site. Oftentimes they have corporate headquarters or someplace they want to also have a copy in, so we're finding that works quite well. Again, you can see it's really broke down into sections here. Here's general section, pretty easy questions. You know, yes, no, is the building sprinklered? Are the valves sealed, locked, or with a tamper switch? You know, quite generic. Here's a wet systems asking, you know, is it hydraulically calculated? The dry systems, it's talking about is the, you know, the room heated and so forth. So pretty easy information here. Here's one I would definitely recommend if you have your own maintenance personnel doing weekly, monthly inspections, is keeping this form right by the risers, because it just real easy. It tells the valves, who it was that looked at it, whether the sprinklers looked all right, the valves, and the pressure on the gauges here. Again, you know, it doesn't take much to get in the habit of doing this, and it's very easy once you get going, because, you know, the worst thing is, like the previous presenters, to have that system not operate. Here's an example of a standard wet system. And again, this is breaking it into monthly, quarterly inspections about the fire department, the control valve, the alarm valve. This valve you can tell by, or riser assembly, you can tell by, here's the control valves. There's one above and one below here. That yellow indicator there, that's a visual indicator that you should be able to tell just by looking at it, that system's on. Because that is parallel with the pipe. If that yellow indicator was perpendicular, it'd tell you that paddle inside is shut. So all sprinkler systems have indicating valves, and they can't close any faster than 5 seconds. The reason being is they want you to avoid water hammer on a system. It's not like a standard culinary system that water is usually flowing all the time. These systems are usually stagnant. So they want to make sure that you can't close it down too quick and cause problems. But in addition, you can, you know, quickly see that the gauges are indicating approximately the same pressures. I know you can't really read it from there, but, you know, if you get that bottom gauge shut down and the top gauge would have pressure locked in it because of the check valve part of this, it would give you an indication that your water supply is shut off. You wouldn't believe the amount of times we've gone out to do an inspection and found the water supply. They paved the road out the street, for instance, the year before. Well, they've gone over the control valve, paved over it, no one knows where it's at, but it's shut off. So little things like that you really have to pay attention to. Here's a dry riser, and on this one you really can't see too much from this angle, but that valve is closed. You can see that the pressure on here is actually up. I think at this point we was actually out doing an inspection, that's why that valve was turned off. But, you know, again, we've a number of times gone onto a job site and found that those are closed. And quite, you know, it's laid out in the same format. Here's your monthly inspections, your quarterly, and up here it's telling you, or is it a monthly, quarterly, annual, 3 or 5 year inspection? Generic form here. Fire pumps. Basically 2 separate types of fire pumps here. This top one being a vertical turbine diesel pump. This actually is built on top of a this house is built on top of an underground storage tank. So that's pulling water up with the diesel pump itself. This is a horizontal split case pump. This is an electric pump here. Both of these are quite common in buildings. Not so much in Utah, but other parts of the country. One of the advantages of Utah is we have these high mountains around it. We have a lot of water pressure. So while we do have quite a few fire pumps, we don't have the number that other parts of the country do. But here again, it's broken up in just pretty standard, easy to follow things. You know, this is generic, so it's got both the diesel and the electric requirements in it. That's why you have a yes, no, or NA. And, you know, your personnel can do those weekly ones, monthly, no problem with those. Here's an example of a deluge or pre-action. Again, you can see that the valve is open on that. And, you know, the system looks pretty good shape here right now. It's sitting on top of a strainer. This valve here is what they call an OS&Y valve. That valve is closed. And the reason that valve is closed right there is this type of system. That's a flushing valve. This being a strainer here, it has perforations in it. This is where it picks up the debris, so every so often you have to flush that strainer out, make sure everything's out of it. That's why it's closed, because normally you don't want that operating. But again, we're back to the monthly, quarterly inspections on these. On these type of systems, you also have the requirement for the NFPA 72, the alarm detection part of that. These two systems have a separate detection part. The old, you know, what I call the Hollywood movies where all the heads go off at once, that's a deluge system. You know, you'll see that mainly in, you know, high-risk areas, aircraft hangars, around transformers and power plants and so forth. Here's a side-by-side comparison. Two wet risers right here. You can see the one on the left. We can see visually from the outside it's clean, the valves are open, the gauges are up. The one on the right, you can see has been leaking externally for quite some time. You can also see down here that gauge, that valve is shut off, and both gauges are reading 0. Don't know how long that system was like that when we showed up to do an inspection on it, but obviously there was a problem. That system was, yes sir?
Well, I'm just gonna make another comment about the, on that one, it looks like the valve to the drain is set to an automatic system. A lot of that's automatic rather than the valve itself. But we had a problem in our jail where the prisoners let off one of these fire extinguishers, broke it in the jail cell. And it's come down, we didn't have drains in our cells.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had water coming down the stairways and everywhere else. But what would have helped, the jail, this was at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, the jailer went out to do that, shut the water off. The water still comes into the building, and you still got a lot of damage that can happen. Had he known that there's a drain there that you can open up and take a lot of that water away, it would have helped our situation.
Yeah.
So there is a drain on those, and
Yeah, right there is a,
training.
that's the main drain right there.
Right. So,
And this one, it's back behind you, really can't see it that well from the angle of the picture, but it's there.
right, but you can minimize your damage.
You
Except
can.
for our 911 system, the water.
Yep.
So when I got over there, to open it up and get a lot of that water away, it would have been pretty serious.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, if you have a 2 or 3 story building and that occurs on the first floor, everything above is going to drain out of that head unless you open those drains. That's a good point. Thank you. All right, back to this. Like I said, the one on the right here is what we call a red tag system. And we'll discuss that a little further. That's part of the requirements of the state here. I wanted to show you some examples of sprinkler heads and their improper use, or these heads need to be replaced. This one up here, for the life of me, I can't figure why they used the sprinkler head as an explosion-proof plug on an electrical device. You know, I guess the maintenance guy was pretty ingenious on that, but, I mean, that definitely doesn't meet the intent of what the sprinkler's intended for, and it doesn't meet the electrical code, either one. This head right here, you can see all the green and blue on that. That head, all the corrosion, that head needs to be replaced. That's a time bomb waiting to go off right there. So, and this one here, I get a kick out of. That's a bathrobe strap is the only thing I can equate it to, wrapped around that sprinkler head. I don't know if they're trying to keep the head warm, trying to keep it away from that duct, or exactly what they're doing. That may have been rattling at one time. But first of all, the head doesn't meet the code requirement because of the discharge blockage right there. But then to wrap that around is really funny. This one here, that head has been painted. And code very specific says painted heads have to be replaced. Reason being, these heads are designed to go off at specific temperatures. If you put paint on those, that's another insulation layer that would impede that head may never go off, or it would not operate in the time that it's supposed to and have a larger fire. Okay, here's some examples of water gauges, and per 5.3.21 of NFPA 25, a gauge should be replaced every 5 years or sent back in and certified and recalibrated. It's cheaper to replace a gauge than it is to have it recalibrated because we have to send it into the manufacturer. So I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but right here on this gauge is 1959. You know, that gauge definitely needs to be replaced. I'm sure it's older than most of you in here. Unfortunately, I'm older than that one. This one, that year is right here, 2011. So that one's coming up where it'll have to be replaced. But I just want to ask, if anyone in any of your facilities has a gauge back from the 50s or older, let me know. I'll come replace it free. Because I have a collection of these. I have some of these going back to the 30s. So, here's some common things on fire department connections. Now, they can either be located on the building itself. The one on the right is a dry standpipe system. You can see that it tells you right here what they are. This tells you it's an automatic sprinkler system. A flush mount versus an exposed dry system, or exposed connection. One of the things we find as problems is most of these are made out of brass, and we find that people steal these caps and everything else and sell them. We've even found that they actually cut the fire department connection right off the wall and take the whole connection, not just the caps. So, by all means, look at those on a weekly basis. Here's some freestanding fire department connections. Now, you can see these have what we call Knox caps. The only way to get those off is the fire department has a key that will fit, that they can take them off. That's a deterrent to keep people from stealing them. You can see this one, the new brass versus the old brass. Someone's taken part of that off there. The other reason, and the chains for these caps are hanging loose, they were probably attached like these. They couldn't get the cap off to start with, so they just took the outer part and they had to do that to replace that. One interesting note on the freestanding fire department connections, Ken has kept careful eye whenever we do a 5-year test on these, because every 5 years we want to actually put water through these. We've had 100% failure rate on freestanding fire department connections. So my concern is you have a firefighter that now has a false sense of security that he's going to be able to pump into that, and that system's not going to work for him. So I recommend that you have wall-mounted fire department connections. You know, there's some argument that you can put these, 40 or 60 feet away from the building and, it's easier for the fire department. The problem is they're not maintained and tested all the time, and that underground pipe is normally dry, and if it's ran in ductile iron or C900, those gaskets dry out, and the minute you hit them again, you're blowing them apart. So, personal recommendation, go with wall mounted. And we can also find them totally hidden from view. And like we talked earlier, this is not acceptable. This is the same freestanding FDC with the tree, but on this one, there's a wall mounted that says auto sprinkler right there. And, they've done a beautiful job of landscaping that, but that landscape over time has grown over that FDC, so they never know it was there. Now, systems are also required to have various types of signs on them. Here's an example of an antifreeze system. Antifreeze were quite common in buildings in this area up until recently. NFPA, actually, there was a death in Truckee, California, because antifreeze is the combustible liquid in a fire suppression system. Sounds strange, but for years they were done just on small loading docks, grocery stores, and receiving areas. In the last 10, 15 years, residential systems and apartment complexes are now required to be sprinklered, but were never sprinklered in the past. And they put antifreeze. We've seen 1,500 gallon antifreeze systems. And because of that, when these go off, there's potential for, like I say, Truckee, California, there was one person died. Out here in Harriman, there was a fire at the Farm Gate Apartments. Mother and her young son playing with matches, head right above him went off, and from what I understand, they were burned, and one fireman told me, he says, the best I can equate to that is I was in Vietnam and it looked like napalm. He says, so, NFPA now says any new systems, you cannot use antifreeze unless it's with an approved solution. Currently there is none, doesn't look like there will be any. And as a matter of fact, they're saying that by September of 2022, all existing systems will have to be replaced with either a listed antifreeze, which, like I say, none is out there, or they're going to have to go with alternative ways of doing it, either insulation, heat, tape, dry systems. Systems already installed, they're not going to be able to do that. But the state of Utah has taken, from what I say, kind of like the ostrich with its head in the sand approach. They're still allowing new systems that be up to 150 gallons of antifreeze using premix. The problem with that is we're seeing contractors out there stack 10 150 gallon systems off of one manifold for one building. So I think we're doing the end user, the owners, a big disservice. Houses, for instance, they're going to have to disclose if they have antifreeze in it to sell the house. So you're going to have a buyer that's not going to buy it unless it's changed, and an existing owner that's going to be upset about it. So, watch that. You guys may have antifreeze in your facilities. 2022 is going to be changed. Here's some additional signs. The top general information sign has not been as a requirement for that many years, but it's extremely helpful, especially in a high pile storage application. Some big warehouses now, storage height has gone up, building height has gone up. So this sign is very good to have. You know exactly what it was designed for. The bottom sign is